Hello and welcome to the Leaders Lounge podcast. My name is Simon Cohen, founder of Cohesis, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Mia Maxfield, CEO of the Shire of Coorow. So hello and welcome, Mia.
Hi, Simon. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to have you on. And so look, to kick things off, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to work in local government?
So I was actually living in Perth and really didn't like the city. So I was looking for a bit of a country getaway and saw an ad advertised, ironically, in the city of Kalgoorlie-Boulder, where I grew up as a teen. So applied and was successful in becoming their city accountant, which I did for a couple of years. Then if you had have asked me, I think 6 months into my local government career, it would have been a hard no. I was not staying. It was too different to the public sector. The private sector. But I was not made to stay, but I had to stay because we had an agreement that I had to be there for 12 months. And now I couldn't imagine being in any other industry. So that was way back in 2008. And then, so I spent 2 years at City of Kalgoorlie-Boulder, then went to Shire of Dundas as the deputy and spent 4 and a bit years as a deputy between Shire of Dundas and Shire of Yilgarn. Then made the big break into my CEO role. So this year actually marks 10 years as CEO in local government. So,
congratulations. That's fantastic.
So thank you. Pretty proud of that fact. So my first CEO role was out at the Shire of Sandstone. And then I headed east for a little while. So I spent 2 years over in South Australia in local government as a CEO. And unfortunately, my dad got sick. So that's what brought me back to WA. When I come back from WA from South Australia, I was at Shire of Coorow and then finally here. So,
yeah,
wow. 3 years at Coorow.
So you've got a massive amount of regional local government experience then.
Have actually never worked in a metropolitan council. So I couldn't show you the contrast between the two because I just have never worked in metro.
So for the people who might not know too much about local government and the workings of local government, maybe just take a moment and explain, what does your role as a CEO involve, and what are some of the biggest challenges that you face in terms of running a regional local government shire?
Yeah, so a CEO in, I guess any council is responsible firstly to the council. So we're required to deliver the vision of the particular local government and the council of the day, so much like state or federal government. We, as a CEO, oversee absolutely everything in terms of governance, building, planning, community development, waste. We're responsible for maintaining, obviously we have staff under us, but at the end of the day, we're responsible in ensuring all the compliance and governance around those things. Challenges in rural local governments. Probably attraction and retention is the big thing. People think, coming to the country, they're not going to be able to get the same experience as they would in a metropolitan council. And, that.
And is that true? Is that fair?
Absolutely not. So I think, and I have worked at City of Kalgoorlie-Boulder, which is obviously a larger regional council, and you're very much in those ones work in silos. So if you're doing finance, then I was finance at City of Kalgoorlie-Boulder, but I only did certain finance functions. So I didn't touch on rates and I didn't touch on the whole of corporate services. So the larger councils are very much silo. I think in the smaller regional local governments, my staff touch on everything because we just need to get it done. So we have the same governance requirements at the moment. Hopefully that'll change soon. But as the City of Perth, for instance, who have 300, 400, whatever staff they have. So we're required to do exactly the same. So my staff actually touch on a lot of stuff. And then something that we provide in the regions that the city councils don't provide is a service for the Department of Transport. So the city staff wouldn't get that experience as the same as our country staff do. So.
Understood. So what kind of incentives or policies are generally in place, or do you put in place specifically to help attract and retain staff in regional shires?
Yeah, so they vary. Obviously, each council makes their own. Shire of Coorow, if we have available, we provide housing at a subsidised rate for all staff, no matter what level you are, if there's something available. And for those who own their own home within one of our towns, because we obviously have 3 towns within the Shire, if they own their own home, we pay them a fortnightly housing allowance to keep them working for the Shire. So we also do matching super, so they have the opportunity to salary sacrifice a certain percentage of super, and then council will match them the same up to 6% at this council.
Right. Okay. And then, do those incentives work? Do you find that they work? And do people feel if they've got no prior experience of regional local government, how does it typically sit with them? Is it a big culture shock, or typically it's something that they have to get used to, or does most of the time it just simply feels, yes, okay, it's a smaller area, but it feels like any other?
I would think that my staff feel like they're provided the same opportunities as what they would be in the metro, probably more so because we're more willing to upskill them and cross-skill them. So a lot of our staff, especially within the office, and I guess with our outside staff, are cross-skilled. So, if somebody's away, they have the opportunity to fill in. I guess local government in itself is quite different to the private sector, and in small country, small regional areas, everybody knows everybody. So you don't get a break when you go to have dinner or go to a cafe or do something. So that, I think, for a lot of staff is hard to deal with to start with. And then being regional and smaller, everybody just expects that the staff will go and do something over at the football field on a Saturday because they've got a home game, but they don't, I guess they don't sort of get that segregation between working hours and not working.
Yeah, no, understood. And I suppose with talking about working in regional governments, how has technology transformed the way that you deliver services in local governments? And seeing as you've been a CEO now for 10 years, let's say over the last 10 years, how have you seen the change in technology within regional?
Yeah, I've certainly seen an evolution. Back in the day, I think it was just emails and maybe an electronic record system, which smaller local governments probably didn't and maybe still don't do as well as we could because we don't have a designated resource. But at Coorow, like I said, we have 2 coastal towns plus Coorow, which is inland. There's about 115 kilometres between the 2 offices, so it is quite a distance. So having that connectivity between the 2 offices to share the same resources and not have to email and then copy and paste and make sure you save the live version, it certainly has evolved into being it's actually helpful, instead, and we still do in our records, some paper records we still hold, so we do still have a little bit of a segregation, but definitely technology has brought the 2 closer together.
And then you mentioned around cross-skilling and upskilling. Do you find that when people join Coorow that they have the necessary technical skills or technology skills to use those kind of systems, or is part of that upskilling and training to help people get accustomed to those tools and technologies?
Yeah, so we don't have the luxury of a metro council where we have a designated department for IT, so we do outsource that. So our staff, we rely on them to do certain things. And then we have partnerships such as with Cohesis, where, that the technology that's able to be done off-site to assist us with things as simple as collating all of our community requests and maintenance, different things like that. That's invaluable, and we would never be able to get that service in-house, I guess, because we don't have the full-time workload to warrant engaging somebody full-time, but it's certainly something that we still do need.
Yeah. That's a very fair point, that partnerships, and obviously we know each other, and I'm delighted that Cohesis has been a partner with the Shire of Coorow for a little while now. But it also takes me back to something else that you mentioned before, with regards to the compliance burden on regional local governments being the same as for the larger metro cities. I can obviously appreciate your view that does it really make sense for a small local government to have the same level of compliance burden as a city? Probably not. And I would agree with that. What do you think is a satisfactory level of compliance requirement that should be placed on a local government that is placed on a larger city? Well, what's fair?
I guess a lot of the compliance, well, it's hard to say because, again, each local government is vastly different. Even though they're all the same band, they are vastly different. But from our perspective, a lot of the changes in things, governance, know that the Local Government Act and regulations are currently changing. So different avenues of that, I guess, are challenging for a small local government because we don't have the dedicated resource that continually watches due dates and, there's a small thing that'll come through rather quickly. And so we have the opportunity to miss those things. Whereas the larger local governments have dedicated governance officers. That's all they do. And in terms of some of the reporting, it's quite time consuming, or a smaller local government has to go out and resource those externally. So it then becomes costly for us to maintain that same level of governance as a larger local government.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, I suppose it comes down to funding at the end of the day, and whether a greater provision should be provided for regional governments to have that additional funding if they're going to be levied those kind of requirements. I did find it hard whilst I agree with the principle that how can a smaller business be expected to meet the compliance requirements of a larger organization when they don't have the funding? In my own personal view, something's got to give there because, as you know, I visit different regional areas and what have you. I was down south last week and it's hard for them and it's really difficult across the board. Local governments are stretched typically, and it's therefore enough to sometimes keep services running without being levied with a lot of these additional requirements that seem to come from nowhere quite often. But at the same time, all local governments have a duty of care, have a duty to maintain compliance and adhere to regulations, and not to just do it, but to be seen to be doing it as well. So a balance needs to be drawn. And I'm not saying that I know the answer to it, but I was just interested in understanding. I always like to ask this kind of question to understand different people's views.
And most certainly with the current changes in the worker health safety legislation, that's been quite a big debate, I guess, in regional local governments in terms of the bushfire brigade volunteers. And so that creates a huge burden and a huge amount of work that a small local government has to do. We never undertake unsafe practices. Now we have to be extra vigilant and put different mechanisms into place. So just little things like that. And then smaller local governments do provide so many different services that the city ones don't provide, such as medical services and things like that, which are actually state or federal responsibility. So we're then also trying to navigate those sorts of things in terms of providing the right sort of level of service to buildings and equipment and stuff that they need.
I haven't actually visited yourself in Coorow, but in some of the other local governments that I've visited, where health services are provided, some of the facilities are absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. So we do actually have we share a doctor with Three Springs and Carnamah. And as part of that service, we do provide a little surgery, but we provide the equipment. Obviously, he doesn't do the higher end medical services from here, such as blood tests and, removal of different things. But he does still require the examination stuff and the sanitised equipment and all of that sort of stuff. So we do still have some responsibility in providing that to maintain that service for our town.
Yeah. And then I suppose coming back a little bit to provision of service and people coming in to regional governments and that, how do you see remote working playing a part in being able to attract staff and also being able to deliver services? Is that something that you are in favour of, enabling people to work remotely, or is it up to a point, or does it actually hinder service delivery?
So we do have some services that we deliver remotely. So our building and planning are contract services, and they work remotely, and unless the need requires them, they don't actually attend the office. And we have an EHO who works for another local government and then contracts to us on a certain day. So he, for the most part, will work remotely, but then he does visit once a month. So we have a bit of both. Obviously, there are positions within the council that can't work remotely. But I guess the beauty is, if there is a beauty with COVID, it did actually change the way I think everybody thinks about how they deliver their services and doing things remotely and, allowing staff to work from home. Whilst we don't let any administration staff work from home now, there are occasions if they're sick but they're still able to work or something, they will stay at home so that they don't pass the germs around the office. So
COVID was a game changer for, I think, the mentality in WA specifically. I found it a massive culture shock when I came to WA from the UK. I'd been working at home remotely, working with teams in different countries and continents for 4 years. And then I turned up to a quasi-government organisation in the city. And I'd actually hit my arm, I think, and needed some time. I said, but I can work from home. And it was just like I couldn't carry a bag or what have you. I said, no, if you're not in the office, you're not working. And I think literally my mouth dropped. I just couldn't believe it. The kind of mentality generally, when I was talking to other people as well, that, it was like being in the office was an important thing. And I was speaking to a friend of mine at the time who works in consulting and what have you, and they were working on a large project, and their client was willing to pay an extra $750,000 to fly people over to have them set there working as opposed to them working remotely, because he wanted to be able to see them there at their desks. And it was just incredible that this person would place such an additional cost on something like that. But I think with COVID, and there's been a gradual acceptance, even though it's kind of come back a little bit, there's been a gradual acceptance that for roles people can deliver remotely, you know what I mean? So, but again, not every role can do that. And you're obviously going to have some roles where you need people there, otherwise you can't deliver. If somebody walks into the office, to the admin office, and no one's there, then obviously you can't deliver services.
Correct. And the other big technology thing with COVID was the comeback of the old QR code, like that's now so prevalent. And you just think, everything's like, just do a QR code for that or do a QR code for this. So I think that evolution through the COVID period, because they were big, I think when they first were discovered, and then they dwindled away as like, what's a QR code, and then made the comeback. So
very true, actually. And we often use those as well, quite heavily. So, Mia, I suppose just changing tack and coming back to the discussion around technology, how do you see technology shaping the future workforce in regional local government?
I think it's going to be, it's already been such a large transition, and we're talking technology, even down to the level of our graders and our plant and equipment. Nowadays, our graders, if there's an error, can be checked in the US they literally dial into the grader. So the technology across the board for local government, I think, has already evolved so much that I guess it's just going to keep going. And especially with the creation of the AIs and stuff now, going to give us a better ability to write a report that we might not necessarily have been able to do previously. But that brings some challenges as well. And especially in the smaller local governments, we've got, especially in the outside crew, people who have been here for many, many years. The difference between our older workforce and our newer workforce and the way they operate, even with the younger generation, in terms of getting on their phone and Googling and having a chat and texting. And we have that great divide with staff already because of the generational gaps and the technology changes in the way society operates. So,
and it's an interesting one about AI, and you kind of mentioned some of those points already. Do you see AI at the moment as being more of a positive thing or more of a challenge in terms of the adoption within local government?
Oh, look, I certainly think for us at Shire of Coorow, it's been great. We talk to AI and it helps us write social media posts, and it helps us write letters back to the community when, they're angry, and helps us write reports. So I think the evolution of AI is definitely going to be a game changer for regional local governments. Yeah. There is still some concern for me personally over the confidentiality of your stuff. So, obviously I wouldn't allow or put in any credit card details or anything that's, super confidential. But in terms of just getting information out is really good. And I know I don't do it personally, but I know there are people within the local government sector who actually upload, I was talking to somebody on Friday at the LG Pro board meeting, and they actually upload the act and then ask them to respond to questions in regards to that. And then if it doesn't give them the answer they want, they go try again, more specifically this section, and ask their question again. So it certainly is going to be a game changer in the way.
I agree with that. And for what it's worth, I see AI with two different kind of lenses. One is what you've kind of mentioned there really is the personal efficiency, which is you put a question in, it helps come up with ideas, it helps kind of word things and what have you. And that can help personal productivity, if you know what I mean, help you get more done. And I think that's fine, as long as you don't put anything confidential in there, people's names or customers' names and things like that, and what have you. I think that's kind of fine, as long as the person asking the question knows enough to be able to understand if the answer's wrong. So the example you gave about the act before is a really good one, because the person who's getting the response knows what it is that they're looking for. They just don't need to have to go through the half an hour of trying to word it and what have you. So the fact that they needed an answer that's more specific, shows that they've got enough knowledge to know what good or excellent looks like and what they're looking for.
Yes.
If you don't have that knowledge to begin with, an AI spits something out and then you send it out, then it can be very risky, because so you need to have a certain level of knowledge to be able to use AI to the point that it becomes effective and helpful.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. But I guess, at the level of the reporting and using it for reporting, you would expect that the officer would have that some kind of experience and know what they're talking about and what they're looking for, I guess. So, yeah.
Sure.
So definitely some advantages and definitely some weaknesses around AI, I think.
But then what you said as well, Will, in terms of not trusting it with some things or what have you, the other side of AI is, if you want, I'd say rather than personal productivity, I'd say more like operational efficiency and being able to get information out. And we mentioned reporting before in terms of compliance and governance and what have you. I think that is the security aspect. It depends how you scope your AI over the data that you've got. And obviously there's a big conversation going on about ERP selection and things like that, but and what have you within local, by scoping your AI services over your data sets and locking it down in that kind of way, that is a way that you can get reporting in a way that is secure. The level of security, I think, still needs to be fleshed out in a number of different cases, but that, I think, is definitely a way that if you control your own data and you have your own data locked in, and typically most local governments are using Microsoft 365 in one way, shape or form, but by locking that data in, it provides an opportunity to get elevated reporting and insights into your own data if you can contain and control it and secure it. The challenge then for local governments, as I see, is how do they achieve that given where they are at the moment with the systems that they've got? And that, I think, is the broader challenge.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And the other thing for me would be around the governance for record retention and how the State Records Act is going to see the compliance with anything AI. So I guess this is a watch this space, because as it evolves, they're going to have to make those changes to the legislation and the procedures and everything that we do in terms of that. And the other thing on the flip side to that was the changes with Facebook and other social media platforms around the record retention and recording the public comments and stuff on our pages. So I guess AI is going to face that same scrutiny and how that's done and what the best practice is going to look like for local government.
Yeah, indeed. No, I absolutely agree. So on that basis then, if we were to look ahead for the next 5 years, how would you predict the skills that will be in most demand within local governments? Will it be technology and AI skills, or do you think that there is still going to be a large requirement still for the core skills in and around reporting and finance and things like that?
I think there'll always be a level of having the core skills in the services we provide, because you're all, from a regional local government perspective, you're always going to need your grader drivers and your plan operators and your gardeners, and so those core skills I don't think will change drastically. The biggest change will be the electronics that come through in the plant and the different equipment that they use. But that has to date even been challenging with some of the older staff members who have never touched a computer and can barely use their phone and stuff. So that's already quite an issue, not an issue, but quite an area that we need to work on, especially the graders. And I keep going back to those graders because they are actually really high tech now. Once upon a time they used to operate them using levers, and now it's all changed with the evolution of the technology in those plant items. So and I guess as we progress, there's probably going to be some AI thing that comes out that's relevant to graders and stuff. So it really is a moving target, the technology. And you compare it to 10 or 15 years ago, technology now is vastly different and constantly changing. And again, I guess the social media platforms is something that's probably moved the quickest. Now we're required to have a website. We're required to have certain information on our website, and that's the go-to now. Whereas once upon a time, it used to be, go pin something on the pin-up board in the library or at the front of the office. But now it's, you have to search for that electronically on a website. So the technology impacts on local government are ever evolving.
Yeah. And in terms of your workforce then, like roughly what proportion of your workforce are typically, say, over 45 or over 50 or something like that? Do you have like a kind of aging workforce, or are predominantly most of your staff younger people?
So internally in the office, we're a lot of younger people. We're probably, there would be a couple over 50, me almost included in that.
Yeah, me as well. I have to kind of put a little bit. In fact, 6 months today, I shall be 50 apparently. So,
I'm a little bit closer than that, but yeah. So internally, we do have a lot of younger staff coming through. So I'm lucky; I actually have a younger staff member who's interested in media and marketing. So we offer that as a traineeship. Conversely, in the outside crew, predominantly older. And I guess a lot of smaller local governments are the same, and they've missed that whole succession planning. Technology aside, I think a lot of regional and local governments have missed that succession planning, because I know in our outside crew, I think we have 4 retiring this year. So that's quite a big impact on an already very small workforce. So it's quite a big impact, I think.
And when it comes to new technologies and new systems, and we see this quite a lot ourselves as well, that getting people who aren't au fait with technology comfortable with a new system, no matter how simple it may be, is always part of the battle. And I recognize that. But then I don't know how you feel about this, and maybe I'm going to say something controversial here, but I also then, the flip side of that is what I'm looking to say, is that many of these people will complain about, oh, it's technology, I don't know anything about computers, and then struggle. Ask them to put a sports bet on. It's like, click, 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 sport. They can almost do it blindfold. So I think there's also a fear factor in there that a new system, there's an initial kind of change resistance, which needs to be addressed. And it's not just the technology side or the systems. I think, yes, okay, systems need to be easy to use and intuitive and trained out and all that. But I think there's also what a number of organizations, not just in local government, but everywhere, is they miss that kind of change management piece. And I think it can be done. People can upskill, people can learn these systems. They're often not that difficult to learn, but there needs to be a will. And your point about succession planning, I think, is a good one. And in that, change management around how do you actually evolve the people so they've got the right skills over the coming 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
And I guess historically, the mindset has been, well, if it's not broke, why fix it? That adds, I think, to the change and the change for technology, because they go, well, we've always done it this way. So why do you need to bring in an electronic system for us to sign in to do this? Or why do you need to do that? So,
yeah. No, indeed. A quick story that I think you might appreciate is another CEO who we both know, won't mention any names, was telling me that he was cancelling meetings out of his diary. And he was like, couldn't understand why this would happen. And went to speak to one of his assistants, and this person then said, oh, well, I don't look at that calendar. I use this book, and the book is used as the gateway for the CEO's calendar. So that kind of thing probably needs to change or evolve at some point. But then again, you've had somebody that's part of that evolution that probably needs to happen at some point. But yeah, the adoption of technology goes at different rates in different places.
It does. I would like to think Shire of Coorow is actually probably one of the leaders in technology, because we are trying to automate a lot of things, not automate in terms of getting rid of staff, but automate to make sure that the processes are being followed. And, and Cohesive, one of the main things I love about what we've done, the work we've done with Cohesive, is our agendas request, because you would be at the hotel having dinner, someone would say, oh, there's a pothole over here. And now I just say, great, go onto our website, put it through agendas request, and it'll be sent to us. And we can track it from start to finish. Whereas before we'd go, oh, yep, we'll get someone onto that. And we would forget it. So, it gives staff the ability to make sure we're delivering on what we need to deliver on by adopting all of these technological changes.
Yeah, I obviously have to do something with our branding, because you should know, Mia, by now, that we are Cohesis and not Cohesive.
Oh, sorry, Cohesive.
So we need to change our branding.
Well, however, I was thinking like Cohesive, because we're all working together, Simon.
When have you sat? No.
Sorry, anybody listening, it's Cohesive. Please do not take the lead of Mia and go there doing Cohesive.
But what I would say, though, is the real point is what you're making around using one of our tools, which I love the fact that you do. And it does automate the ability for people to route requests directly into the right people. That saves a lot of time and automates what is often for many local governments that manual handling of a request coming in, putting it on a spreadsheet, sending it to the right person, whether it's an email or what have you, then somebody calling up later on, what happened to my request? Don't know, let me go and find out. They go and find out, go back and then call back. All of that disappears with these tools. And to your point before about those kind of automations and working with partners, and we said off camera a little bit around how I really enjoy helping regional local governments in this space. This is one of those things where, regional local governments often don't have these little types of technologies that can automate those workflows that actually take up a lot of time, that restricts them from delivering what it is that they really want to do. And with a little bit of automation or a little bit of thought and what have you, there's so many of these things that can just be, those pain points that can be smoothed over. And I'm delighted that you obviously really like the fact that you can benefit from that. And we like that as well. But I really think that's a good starting point for how local governments can evolve, especially regional local governments. We talk about AI and we talk about tools, but we haven't actually spoken a lot about automation. And automation is one of those things that so many local governments have so many spreadsheets that all require manual kind of updates. And
there's like 500 versions of the spreadsheet, and you don't know which one you're at or which one's, the most current, because someone's got it hidden on their desktop, for instance.
This is it. And then that also makes your compliance requirements more difficult and the reporting, because you don't know what's the right source of truth sometimes. And one of the things I think, and what I think you appreciate as well from having seen some of these things, is that you don't necessarily need to have big systems to make a big impact. Yeah, you can actually have smaller systems that automate specific things and take away a spreadsheet here or take away manual effort there that can really make a big difference and provide you with the visualizations, the dashboards or the reports or whatever it is, the little graphics that can tell you precisely what's going on. I think those kind of things are a really good stepping stone onto a future path of of how do local governments do things better and more efficiently with the resources that they've got. And yeah, I mean, I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. I mean, obviously from a career perspective, but also on a more broad perspective within regional local governments. I
Yes.
mean,
So in regional local
what do you think?
governments, in regional local governments, not so long ago, you would print your agenda for the 7 to 9 or however many councillors you had. And it would literally be reams and reams and reams of paper. And it would be almost a whole day of printing agendas and then having to deliver them. And, in regional local government, some of our councillors live 70 kilometres out of town. So all of a sudden you're talking about a 150-kilometre round trip, and it's probably 2 or 3 hours to deliver an agenda, which, as you know, is governed and has to be out at a certain time. So now we can just do it electronically, pop it on a hub, and we've started training our councillors to actually appreciate that they're getting it in a more timely and efficient manner. And then that brings me back to, again, working with Cohesis.
Hey.
Bit of emphasis on that. We currently use a hub that we're not very happy with. So that's another piece of work we're doing with you, Simon, and your team, is to prepare a hub for our councillors so that everything that they require is in the one spot. Whereas previous to having any form of hub, we used to put it on a USB and we'd take it out there, and it would have all of the other, like the standing orders and all of the other governance stuff that a councillor is required to have, which we can now have on a hub. So, just that, even that minor change in technology has broadened our scope and efficiency so much more.
Yeah, no, indeed. And so on that then, I was going to say, what's one thing, but maybe there's 2 or 3, but what would be the one or 2 things that councils could do tomorrow to make governance simpler and more effective?
For council, I would say, like for councillors, I should say, definitely look into some form of hub for the smaller regional local governments, because our brief discussion that we've had with you and the team, Simon, and I don't want to keep plugging this, but it's one of our big technology changes within the Shire of Coorow is working with you and your team to get that hub. Our efficiency now is so much better because we're not having to send the works manager out to deliver an agenda on a USB that's 70 kilometres out of town and then 70 kilometres back, plus the chit chat time, because you always got to stop and have a chit chat, right? Because that's what we do. So, that in itself, and as I said, the agendas request, I really, really like that program, and it's such a simple addition to our website, but it has made our service delivery so much better because it goes to the officer it needs to go to. In the event they don't act on it or they don't update it, then it comes to the CEO or bit larger one, it may be a manager. So you have that process of the follow through to make sure that the requests that are coming in are getting done. And one of the hardest parts is actually training the community to get on the website and do it, because they're so used to just having a chat with you at the local footy game or at the hotel where you're having dinner. And I'm very strong on that. I'm like, no, please go to our website. I'm outside of hours. Come and see me between 8 and 5 if that's what you want to do. So.
And that's a really interesting point, because I've never really had anyone say that to me before, like with having used one of our systems in that way. How is the effect within the community? Do people think, oh, actually, you know what, it's quite nice that we can go to the website and log it and get a response back? Or do they lose that? Do they feel as though they're losing some human touch?
No, we've had really good reports, because previously we would receive a complaint or, whatever you want to call it, service request. And we may have acted on it, but they don't know we've acted on it. It might be a pothole or a blowout in a gravel road. We fixed it, and then they don't travel it for another 3 months. And lo and behold, the pothole's moved 2 inches on and they don't know that it's been fixed. So I think they really enjoy that communication, albeit, automated or whatever you like to call it. But they enjoy that response that says, yes, we've gone out on such and such a date and we've fixed whatever it is that they've put in for the service request. So I don't think in terms of that there's the angst in the community about not having personal communication, because it is always still there. If somebody chooses to come in, we still have people who come in and pay their rates over the counter because that's what they've always done. That's what they like to do. They don't have to, because we now have BPay and all the other technological advances that have happened in that space, but they still like to come in. So, the option's still there. Same as if a service request comes in over the counter, the staff will jump on our website and log it for them. So we still use the technology, but we still allow that personal contact if that's what the community want. So,
yeah, that's good to know. So we've spoken off camera a little bit about, and obviously with your background being in regional councils and being a CEO of regional councils for 10 years, we're obviously both been in to make a difference in regional WA. How would you recommend, if people are watching this and they think, oh, you know what, I'd like to get involved, how would you recommend that people get involved in local government or in terms of making a difference in their local community?
There are so many avenues, Simon, it's just crazy. So if you want to become an employee and take on a career, there is probably a good 15 or more career paths that you can choose to go down, from university degrees for the position to administration. If you're talking the finance and administration, there's so many different areas within that. Even the finance, you have creditors, debtors, rates, all of that sort of stuff. So it really is so many different career choices for people. If you don't want to be an employee, you can always become a volunteer of council. And, we deliver so many different services and so many different events and stuff that there's always something that somebody will be interested in. We have partnerships with many groups within the Shire that have volunteers, historical groups and coast care groups, and just community development groups in general who just do things for their community. So there's many of the avenues to be involved in your community, without a doubt.
And if there's someone looking that wants to start a career in local government or wants to collaborate with local government, what would be any takeaways or advice for those kind of people?
Just take the plunge. If you see something advertised, and especially in the rural areas, if you see something advertised and may not necessarily have all of the qualifications or all of the experience that's being asked, just apply, because recruitment is hard out here, and we will look at somebody, and if we interview them and we think they've got the aptitude to do something, then we're happy to put the resources in to make that happen. Just because you might not tick every single box, if you tick a good portion of the boxes, then just absolutely jump in and do it and apply. And my advice is, the local government is very, very different to the private industry. So, stick at it. And I couldn't actually imagine being in any other industry now after my very rocky start, where I probably wouldn't have stayed if I had the option. But I'm so glad that I was forced to have, not forced, that's probably the wrong word, but I had to, as part of my agreement, stay. So I'm really glad I did, because who knows where I would have been now, but I'm in an industry that I absolutely love, and I will talk to anybody about it. So
no, it's fantastic. And if anybody watching this would like to reach out to you or maybe ask for some advice directly, what is the best way of them reaching you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. You can just search my name and I should pop up there. I don't think it's very common. So it's not like I'm a Jane Smith or something and there'll be 10 of us pop up. So if they just search me on LinkedIn, happy to answer any questions if they've got any. And then they can check out Shire of Coorow on Facebook and Instagram.
And all good social media channels. Yes, indeed. Well, Mia, I've really enjoyed chatting with you today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Simon.
As always, whenever we get together, it's always a good chat.
It is. So just keep making those great programs, because they're really assisting us. Well, if you just keep that up, that'd be awesome.
No, thank you. And we are trying. So if you enjoyed this conversation, please like and share it within your network and your favorite podcast app. We are here to try and help inform and deliver a broad range of business insights to help business leaders make better decisions. And we rely upon your help to achieve that. If you would like to appear on the podcast, or if you would like me to address a particular topic, then please contact me at leadersloungepodcast@cohesis.com.au. And thank you very much. And thank you, Mia, as well.
Thank you, Simon. It's a pleasure.